One afternoon, my husband James called me, his voice uncharacteristically tense. "Why are you leaving our newborn with my sister every day?" he demanded. Startled, I quickly assured him, "Millie's at home with me, asleep right now." There was a pause. "Really?" he asked, sounding more confused than before. I felt the same confusion creeping over me as well, and I resolved to find out what was going on. Reaching out to my sister-in-law Ruby seemed like the best way to get to the bottom of this. "Allow me to introduce myself, I'm Rosie, and I've been married to James for 3 years. We recently welcomed our daughter, Millie, who has brought unimaginable joy to our lives. But as a first-time mom without family nearby, navigating motherhood has been challenging. Since leaving the hospital, I've been adjusting to life with a newborn on my own during the day. Thankfully, James has been incredibly supportive despite his long work hours. He's been my rock, soothing Millie in the middle of the night and sharing every parenting challenge with me." So when James called that day, frustrated and worried, I was taken aback. "Mom told me you've been leaving Millie with Ruby," he said, exasperation in his voice. "I understand you're exhausted, but if you needed help, we could have discussed it. Ruby's never taken care of a newborn." The mention of Ruby completely blindsided me. Ruby, James's sister, lives just a short walk away with their parents and has been working from home, which makes her flexible with her time. However, I couldn't recall ever asking her to watch Millie. "Wait," I said, trying to piece things together. "What do you mean, leaving Millie with Ruby? I haven't been doing that. Why would your mom think so?" James sounded equally baffled. "It's been nearly 2 weeks now. Ruby didn't say anything to avoid causing tension, but Mom couldn't stay silent anymore." My mind raced. Could there have been some misunderstanding between Ruby and his mother? Or did someone else mention this to his mom? "I swear, Millie's been with me this whole time," I said, glancing over at our sleeping daughter. Realizing that something deeper was at play, I promised James I'd get to the bottom of it. "What do you mean?" he asked, clearly puzzled. "Honestly, I'm just as confused as you," I replied. "I've been sticking to the advice to keep newborns at home, so aside from doctor appointments, I haven't been anywhere. I haven't even visited your family, and Ruby hasn't come over since Millie was born." "So, whose baby is Ruby taking care of, then?" James asked, looking bewildered. "Why would she make up a story about looking after our baby?" Each question seemed to lead to more confusion. As the lunch break chime sounded on the phone, I knew I had to get to the bottom of it. "I'm going to call Ruby," I decided. If she really thinks she's looking after Millie, that's a huge misunderstanding. I also want to check in with Mom. James hesitated, then sighed. "I'm sorry for doubting you. I was just really worried about Millie." "It's okay," I reassured him. "You're just concerned, and when I told you she was right here with me, you believed me. Thank you for that." As soon as the call ended, I dialed Ruby. "Ruby, do you have a minute? There's something I need to ask you." "Actually, I needed to talk to you too," she replied. "Ruby and James are close in age, she's my sister-in-law, but we've always been friends as well. We even grew up together while I was dating James. So it surprised me that she hadn't mentioned anything about taking care of a baby." "James just told me you've been looking after Millie," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I haven't left her with anyone, though." "What's going on?" "Huh?" Ruby's shocked voice came through the phone, and in the background, I heard a baby crying. It seemed she really was with an infant. A realization dawned on me, she wasn't lying, she genuinely believed she was looking after Millie. "Ruby," I began, choosing my words carefully. "Millie is right here with me, sound asleep. I'm as confused as you are. How did you end up with a baby, and why did you think it was Millie?" Ruby took a breath and then explained. "Last week, Dad showed up with a baby and told me, Rosie's feeling overwhelmed, so you should help her out with the baby." I was stunned. "And when I thought about calling you to check," Ruby continued, "Dad told me, if you contact Rosie, it'll just stress her out. Show some consideration for your sister-in-law. I was scared, honestly. I've never taken care of a baby before. I could hardly process this revelation. I couldn't believe Dad had been behind all of this, and now I had to find out where this baby had come from. I have responsibilities of my own, even when I'm at home. Yet, here I was, caught in a web of confusion that seemed to begin with my father-in-law's deceit. The identity of the child Ruby was looking after remained a mystery. Thinking I might clear things up by confronting my father-in-law directly, I asked if he was home. He's out, Ruby said. These days, he comes home late in the evening, takes the child Maris has been caring for, says he'll return her to Rosie, then leaves. He usually comes back in 20 to 30 minutes. Frustrated by the manipulation involving my daughter and me, I felt compelled to address this head-on. I understand, I replied. I'll discuss it with James. We might come by tonight. After ending the call, I quickly emailed my husband, sharing what I'd learned from his sister. We need to ask Dad directly, he suggested. When James got home, we headed over to my in-laws. On the way, James shared his recent conversation with his mother. She was also shocked to learn that the child she thought was her grandchild wasn't. Quite a revelation, isn't it? He said. This isn't how I envisioned Hannah's first family gathering. His mother hadn't met our daughter yet, due to her back issues. I'd hoped to introduce Millie to her soon, but I felt disheartened that our introduction had to take place amid such chaos. When we arrived, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law looked visibly confused. As we walked in, Ruby spoke up. James, Rosie, Dad said he'd be back with the child we've been taking care of, but he hasn't returned yet. James quickly stepped in. I see, Mom. Despite all this confusion, here's our daughter, Millie. He gently nudged me forward, and I brought Millie closer to my mother-in-law. Her expression softened as she saw Millie. She's absolutely adorable, she murmured, smiling. She looks just like Bea did as a baby. I'm thrilled to finally meet her. Rosie, you've done wonderfully. I'm so sorry you've had to go through all of this. It's all right, I said, managing a smile. I'm just as confused as everyone else. Ruby, however, was still upset. I'm baffled too. Who is this child I've been caring for? I don't understand why Dad would lie like this. I've put so much effort in, believing it was Millie. He should think about my feelings too. Her frustration mirrored my own. Sensing the tension, James tried to lighten the mood. But Maris said you've met Millie before, he teased gently. Surely you could tell she was a different baby? I had wondered if all babies looked alike, but something felt off. I had assumed that babies' appearances changed quickly, so I didn't question it further. Ruby quickly defended herself, but before she could say more, our father-in-law returned. I'm back. Wait, why are James and Rosie here? His panic was obvious, and it only confirmed my suspicion that this deception had been his doing. The rest of us exchanged disapproving glances, silently accusing him. Struggling under the weight of the tension in the room, our father-in-law began to stammer. Oh, Rosie, it's been some time. What brings you here? Did you forget something? He tried to deflect attention away, turning to Ruby. Ruby, what's going on? I asked you to check for forgotten items. I could feel my anger rising. How dare he use my name and my daughter's in this deceit, and then turn the blame on Ruby? Instinctively, I pulled my daughter closer, sensing the tension in the air. Both James and Ruby shared my frustration, their fists clenched. I couldn't hold back any longer. My voice was sharp with anger. Dad, seriously? Are you really saying this? This is beyond unacceptable, even for you. My father-in-law seemed startled by the intensity of my tone. Both James and Ruby echoed my sentiments, demanding answers. Dad, explain yourself. James snapped. Rosie has never left Millie with anyone. Why would you make up such a lie? There must be a reason someone would care for a stranger's newborn. That's right. Ruby added, her voice filled with conviction. You manipulated me into caring for a child. Who is this baby? I'm terrified. Even if it's my nephew's, let alone strangers. I won't tolerate this anymore. Our father-in-law stood speechless as we continued to glare at him, demanding the truth. But it was my mother-in-law's reaction that shocked us all. She turned pale, her voice barely a whisper. No. It can't be. You're still involved with her? Her words left us stunned, and my father-in-law started to sweat, trying to feign innocence. What are you talking about? He stuttered, trying to deflect. But my usually calm husband had reached his limit. Dad, enough with the act. Do you think we're stupid? We know you've been lying about everything. Just come clean. James, please, I pleaded, trying to calm him, but my husband wasn't backing down. No, James said, his voice rising. Dad, you've been manipulating Rosie and Millie to cover up your lies. You owe Ruby an apology. Caring for a newborn is a huge responsibility, even if it's your own child. Think about how overwhelming it must have been for Ruby, especially since she's never been a mother before. My husband's words came fast, each one cutting through the tension in the room. He couldn't stop once he started, and there was no excuse that would make him back down. Finally, my father-in-law seemed to realize he could no longer hide the truth. He spoke softly, almost as if resigned to his guilt. That child is mine. At his confession, my husband stopped in his tracks, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Ruby and I were just as stunned, too shocked to speak. The silence was broken by my mother-in-law's voice, trembling with emotion. I knew it, she whispered, her eyes filled with tears. You're still involved with her. I was a fool to forgive you before. Her? James asked, his voice filled with confusion. What do you mean? My father-in-law's face drained of color as he struggled to answer, but it was my mother-in-law who spoke again, her voice shaking. He had an affair, she said, each word heavy with the weight of betrayal. It happened around the time you two were getting married, about 3 years ago. He promised me he'd never do it again, and I forgave him. The truth finally sank in. Millie resembled James because she was his flesh and blood. I had thought she was my true grandchild, but now everything made sense. The weight of this revelation hit my mother-in-law hard, and she broke into tears, unable to contain her grief. Her distress only fueled my anger toward my father-in-law. James, trying to regain his composure, unleashed his fury on the man. You're despicable, Dad. You not only deceived us but betrayed Mom twice. How could you stoop so low? I can't believe someone like you is our father. Ruby's disbelief followed, her voice filled with shock. What do you mean, my child? Are you joking? You had a child with your mistress and left it with me? How could you do something so despicable? I never want to see your face again. Despite the scathing accusations from his own children, our father-in-law merely chuckled. Calm down, he said dismissively. There's nothing we can do about what's already happened. The mistress didn't want to marry me or anything like that. She just didn't have any money, so she had to work. In the meantime, I had to take care of the child. His cold indifference was too much. I couldn't hold back any longer. Enough. I interjected, my voice trembling with anger. This isn't a laughing matter. A life has been brought into this world. Do you understand the gravity of that? At your age. Before I could finish, my father-in-law seemed taken aback, losing his balance and stumbling to the ground. Instead of helping him up, James and Ruby unleashed a new wave of anger. You worthless old man. Ruby shouted. You're no longer a father. I can't even stand the sight of you. Get out of our lives. Even faced with their fury, my father-in-law attempted to downplay the situation. Don't say such things, he muttered, as though it were all trivial. I stared at him, my lips tight with disgust. I've lost all patience for you. We're getting a divorce, I declared firmly. His smile faltered, his face contorting with wrinkles as he tried to plead, but didn't you forgive me last time? His manipulative attempt was futile. Yes, I forgave you for your infidelity, but I won't tolerate your disrespect any longer, I snapped back. Having you out of our lives will bring peace to our home, and as for my survival, I'll manage just fine without you. Watching him cling to my mother-in-law's feet, I felt nothing but disdain. James and Ruby shared my sentiments, their gazes unwavering and cold. It was clear to all of us, everyone had reached their breaking point with him. Ruby, her anger now boiling over, was the first to speak again. I never want to see you again, she hissed, her voice full of disgust. I'll take care of Mom, so we'll be fine without you, Ruby said, her voice steady but firm. But how do you plan to live? You've always relied on Mom for everything, from cooking to laundry. Her words visibly rattled my father-in-law. His eyes shifted to my mother-in-law, pleading. You wouldn't leave me, would you? We've spent decades together. You can't imagine life without me, can you? But any hope he had was quickly dashed. My mother-in-law shook off his arm, her voice sharp with resolve. Stop kidding yourself. How much longer do you need to degrade people to feel satisfied? Who would want to stay with a cheater like you? I'm filing for divorce right now. If you're so fond of her, why don't you go be with your mistress? My father-in-law's face twisted in panic. Wait, let's talk. We can fix this. That woman meant nothing to me. You're the only one I love, he pleaded, grasping at my mother-in-law once more. But his words only provoked another wave of fury from Ruby. Talking to someone who refuses to acknowledge their mistakes is pointless, she snapped. We're leaving soon, and Mom is coming with us. Until then, stay away from our home. I never want to see you again. She pushed him toward the door, but when he refused to move, James had to step in. With a firm grip, he dragged my father-in-law out of the house. Please, wait. Give me one more chance. Just one more, my father-in-law begged, his voice desperate. But his pleas fell on deaf ears as nobody gave him another glance. As Ruby had predicted, my father-in-law's life soon spiraled into chaos. Struggling to manage even the simplest tasks, he couldn't stand the growing clutter and mess in his home. In desperation, he turned to his mistress for help, but she shut him out, making it clear she had no intention of marrying him. Without anyone to care for the children, his mistress was unable to work, and soon financial strains set in. She began pressuring him for alimony and even resorted to legal action to secure child support. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law and mother-in-law found a new apartment not far from ours. As Millie's first month passed, I began visiting them more often, always with Millie in tow. I maintained my close relationship with Ruby, acting as though nothing had changed between us. My bond with my mother-in-law remained strong, and we continued to support each other through it all. Looking forward, I was determined to raise my daughter to the best of my abilities, surrounded by the love and support of my husband, sister-in-law, and mother-in-law. Together, we would face whatever came next.